I was just so sure. I was certain. I don't get it. I really don't understand. That petition was meant to be foolproof. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is the Arsenal Transfer Show. Joining you every single morning at 8 a.m. UK time. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in and making this a part of your morning routines. It is greatly appreciated. I hope you've had a really good week so far. You've made it to Friday. The weekend is here and it is time to have a shout and a scream, apparently. That's where we're at right now. A shout and a scream. That's where we're at right now. Arsenal doing business, getting business done early. But it's just not quite the business that everybody wants. And that's fair enough. Everyone is entitled to their view. You know my views. I've got mine. We've talked about them. We're probably going to talk about them some more today. But there is news that Arsenal have agreed a brand new transfer, and we're going to discuss that. There's further positive news in other spheres as well, which I think is also a good sign that we're going to talk about further. And there's more potentially to come as well as a result of some of the other news that we're going to discuss today. There's some world-breaking news to talk about, and there's a trip to La Manga going on as well to discuss. But good morning to all of you joining us in the chat box. Hope you're doing good. Hope you're doing well. Thank you so much to all of you for tuning in, for joining me. Loga, Laughing Man, Kirill, Civil Salad Z. We've got Martin. We've got Hooded Gooner and Adam. We've got Khan, and we've got Keith, Jason, we've got Joe, Kevin, Domenico, Leroy. Good morning to you all. Thank you so much to everyone that is indeed listening to this morning's episode. It is greatly appreciated. So thank you so much to all of you for indeed clicking on the video and joining me on this Friday morning. I'll be back, of course, with you tomorrow as well, and through the weekend and into next week, where hopefully we can get some plenty more info. This time next week, the next day will be the flights out to Asia. Pre-season officially starting and the tour getting underway. So lots of exciting stuff around the corner. Football, from an Arsenal perspective, getting back to action. We've got 13 days. It was 2 weeks. 2 weeks yesterday. Oh, 2 weeks. 2 days ago. 2 weeks on Wednesday that our first match of pre-season is set to take place. So, yes, plenty of interesting football stuff to come. If you would be ever so kind to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here with those notifications turned on so you never miss a show, that would be hugely appreciated. So thank you to you all. Right, let's jump, shall we? Let's jump into today's stories, and we start with that world record-breaking news that Arsenal have agreed the biggest ever transfer fee for a female player. £1 million will be paid to Liverpool to join to see Olivia Smith join from Merseyside. It is a deal that has really shaken the Arsenal not even just the Arsenal, but the women's footballing world, and a deal that will see the Canadian international join Arsenal. She's only 20 years of age. She's a forward, of course, so we'll add to Arsenal's attacking line. It's already seen Chloe Kelly, of course, put pen to paper on a permanent deal. Stina Blackstenius, Alessia Russo, Beth Mead. Certainly lots of attacking talent in that Arsenal team already, but Olivia Smith is set to add plenty more. She got 6 goals in 15 appearances at just 20 years of age for Liverpool, and is now set to take the move to Arsenal in what is a headline deal for, of course, the sport. And Amesy in the chat says, I remember the first £1 million male player, Trevor Francis. It shows you the direction that women's football is going in. There is definitely a very strange scenario that women's football has. And what that is that when that £1 million deal for Trevor Francis was done all those years ago, that was a record for the sport as a whole, because clubs at that point, the maximum you could think about paying for a player was £1 million. And as a result, and because of obviously that fact, it's a very different sphere to do business in 2025, because £1 million to Liverpool, of course, is in the context of just Liverpool Football Club is not much at all. But in the context of the women's game at the moment, obviously, it's absolutely massive. And it creates this strange dynamic where men's teams can hold on to their best talent, despite, in terms of what this would be equivalent to in the men's game, you're talking about tens and tens and tens and tens and tens and tens of millions potentially going into triple figures. A world record fee in the men's game, you're going well over 100 million, which obviously many clubs would absolutely have no problem in accepting these days for that amount of money. But in the women's game, it's very different because a world record fee is still in the context of those clubs in 2025. That fee is so much smaller. So how do you contextually, how does a club like Liverpool go, well, we don't have to sell Olivia because £1 million in the context of all of Liverpool Football Club isn't much money. But in the context of the women's game, it's absolutely massive. So there's kind of this respect in some ways that has to be paid and a context that has to be thought about with every single transfer between clubs, because there's almost an understanding that if a club comes in with a world record fee, but they're still contextually quite small in the grand scheme of Liverpool Football Club's business, it's very interesting indeed that how these transfers are going to evolve and develop over the next however many years. And you'd think it would only take one club to turn around and say, no, 1 million, 1.5 million is not going to do anything. So it's a very interesting dynamic. One I'm very, very intrigued by how it evolves over the next few years. But Olivia Smith seems set to join Arsenal for £1 million. Congratulations to her. The Arsenal men's squad have now landed in La Manga, all of the group, of course, that are currently training. And there are a number of interesting inclusions on this list, including, of course, Gabriel and Timber, who have been recovering from their recent procedures. You've also got 15-year-old Max Dowman, who is on the trip as well with the team, expected to be part of the senior squad, potentially this forthcoming campaign. Andre Harriman Anous, also known as Aha, is also with the team, amongst a number of other younger players. And some players whose futures we expect to probably be resolved this summer and maybe leading them away from Arsenal, such as Albert Sambi Lokonga is with the group as well. Leandro Trossard also with the team, who we've got, of course, a story to talk about regarding him. But the big transfer news of yesterday was Madueke. Arsenal have agreed a add-in inclusive deal of £52 million to sign the Chelsea winger, according to Fabrizio Romano, who broke the news late last night. We don't know how much the upfront fee is in itself. We don't know the breakdown of that £52 million as of this moment. But Arsenal have agreed a deal to sign Noni Madueke with, of course, him joining the club next season. It is a deal that has sparked quite the response, as you can imagine. It is a deal that has caused quite a lot of chaos amongst the Arsenal fan base. And it's crazy to me, the reaction personally. I think you can have your opinions, and I won't really go too much more into what I spoke about at length yesterday, because we did a lot on that, of course, as well. But yes, Noni Madueke is indeed joining Arsenal for the forthcoming season. Arsenal, you could argue, are looking to the likes of Manchester City and Liverpool for inspiration. The amount of times they've spent big money on players that weren't necessarily going into their starting 11 for the course of next season. Are Arsenal following that format? Well, maybe, but there's a lot of question marks about whether or not Madueke is the right signing. What I can say is, of course, with him pulling on the red and white of Arsenal, he has my 100% backing. So, and I sincerely hope that's the same for all Arsenal fans, because that's just literally your job. That's what a supporter does. They support. It's clues kind of in the name. So, yeah, very intrigued to see how this goes down. Real Madrid, according to Spanish media, are said now to be open to selling Rodrygo. The left or right wing target, of course, has always been a player that Arsenal have admired so far this summer. But as of yet, there has been no movement in this regard because, of course, obviously, the players in kind of the key thing in this whole thing, the player himself, and he hasn't shown a willingness necessarily, even without guaranteed minutes. He's not shown yet a willingness to want to leave Real Madrid. Arsenal are, of course, a team that we know are very interested, but the price tags that are being quoted are quite significant. I've got my doubts about the 100 million euros, but I had my doubts about a 50 million pound deal for Madueke as well. So the transfer window can throw you some curveballs sometimes. I think a 90 million euro, perhaps slightly less than that, is more realistic, but Arsenal would need, of course, to have the money. And to have the money to go for Rodrygo, they would probably have to sell a player. And the player that looks like he could be on the way out during this window is Leandro Trossard at this point in time. He is with the team in La Manga, as we mentioned, and with the group with their warm weather training camp. But Leandro Trossard has said to have agreed terms, according to Turkish media yesterday, agreed terms with Fenerbahce over a potential deal that would see, of course, him move to Jose Mourinho's club. Very intriguing indeed. This was initially broken by Elise Buse Araç over in Turkey, and then at the Times also reported through Gary Jacob that Arsenal are willing to let Leandro Trossard leave after he agreed personal terms with Fenerbahce on a 3-year deal, but have not yet agreed a transfer fee, and Arsenal would likely want about £20 million to let go of Leandro Trossard. That is what they would be looking for. If Arsenal can get £20 million for Trossard, they've done an excellent deal. Considering we paid £21 million up front for him, guaranteed in his deal. Remember that £27 million that we paid in total, £6 million of that was, of course, in add-ons. £21 million of that was guaranteed. So if Arsenal can get a £20 million deal for Leandro Trossard, agreed with Fenerbahce, I think we can suggest after being, 31 years of age, having just over a year left on his deal, they would have done very well. It would open up potentially the spot for Arsenal then to move for another player who can play on that left-hand side. Now, we do know that Arsenal are considered to be expecting a step up in attempts to sign Eberechi Eze. Ed Aarons of The Guardian reporting yesterday, of course, after the confirmation that Christian Norgard has signed for Arsenal. That was announced yesterday. From a personal point of view, I really did enjoy the announcement video of Christian Norgard signing. Speaking, of course, Andrea Berta said, we're very pleased to welcome Christian Norgard to the club. He has been a consistent high performer in the Premier League and brings many qualities to our club. He is a leader and a player with a high tactical intelligence and versatility who will have a very positive impact on the squad. And we welcome Christian to Arsenal. Arteta said, we're delighted to welcome Christian to Arsenal. He's an international player with a wealth of experience of the Premier League, and he has proven leadership skills and strong character, which will be invaluable to our squad. He's a strong midfielder with an excellent tactical awareness and versatility. He also has physical presence and intelligence, which will give added depth and balance. Christian will bring a lot to the group on and off the pitch, and we're excited to start working with him this next chapter of his career. We welcome Christian and his family. But that, including, of course, Ed Aarons' report, led on to a bit about Eberechi Eze, with Arsenal expected to step up their attempts to sign the player. Now, there were suggestions, claims reportedly of a bid. I've not heard anything to suggest Arsenal have yet made a bid, but that more formal discussions are indeed expected to take place. The Madueke deal is separate from the Eze discussions. It is separate from Arsenal's hopes of landing Eze. It's just worth pointing that out at this stage of play. But Eze is still hoped to be an Arsenal player during this window. For me, the big story, I think, to calm people down was on the cooling off period that John Cross in the Mirror has reported yesterday. The cooling off period between Arsenal and Sporting in talks, of course, last week. Talks reached something of a stalemate, if you like, with Sporting asking for 70 million euros plus 10 million euros in add-ons. Arsenal wanted to pay 65 million euros with 15 million euros in add-ons, and it led to a bit of a stalemate. There were reports in Portugal that Andrea Berta had become quite frustrated in those discussions with Sporting, but that a cooling off period has indeed been established and that talks are set to re-engage in the latter part of this week, and that the two clubs will come together again to discuss the transfer and try to find an agreement. The player, according to Swedish media, is said to be staying in his homeland right now and is not going to be returning to Sporting. The Sporting players are due back for training today. Gyökeres is not expected to be a part of that group that returns to training in Lisbon. And so it will be on Arsenal and Sporting to finally come together to get that agreement done for Viktor Gyokeres. And I think, of course, once this deal is done, once this deal is where we want it to be, I think that will bring a certain element of calmness again back to the fan base, of course, which are, let's be honest, in a state of hysterics right now with the deal for Madueke as is. So let's go to part 2 and discuss some of that chaos with you all in the chat box right after this. Right, this is part 2 of today's show. Of course, we'll be tackling some of your questions, some of your thoughts, your theories, your queries, and more. And so now is, of course, the time to do that. I'm going to say this, obviously, again, I feel like I have to say this a lot. Of course, we have a lot of new listeners that join in every single day, every single morning. The channel keeps on growing, and I'm very grateful for that. And please, if you would be ever so kind to help us to reach our target of 1K likes every single day. But we are a respectful channel, and we don't accept trolling. We don't accept abuse of any player, whether they're Arsenal or not. So please do keep it clean in the chat box and keep your opinions to yourselves if you're unable to do that. But if you're able to explain yourself in a respectful way, we absolutely want to hear them. So let's get into the chat box. Anthony says, Tom, Martinelli has removed Arsenal from his bio on Instagram. Now, I would initially be very cautious. Now, yesterday, of course, we had suggestions that Noni Madueke had removed the ability to leave comments. Turns out it wasn't just, of course, recently that Noni Madueke's comments have been turned off. They've been turned off for quite some time. I'm actually quite glad they've been turned off for quite some time. But that's where we are. I don't know much about that. I don't know if that's recent. I don't know if that's a new thing. I don't know. I don't know if indeed that's true, Anthony. I don't know if he never had Arsenal in his Instagram bio. I don't know if it's ever been there. I don't know if he's had living for football there for however long of a time. I don't know. Very, very difficult to ever tell when things have changed. Let's go to Young King says, in the words of Hand of Arsenal, you don't have to always lie and be overly positive towards every move the club makes. You absolutely don't. And I would encourage people, of course, to be themselves, to be honest about how they feel, just like we are every single show. I give you my opinion. Sometimes it's praising, sometimes it's critical. You have to be straight down the line about how you feel about things. And I have told you many times, I think Noni Madueke's transfer is one of the most baffling transfers that I've witnessed during my time being an Arsenal supporter my entire life. It's one of the more baffling transfers that we have done. But at the same time, he's pulling on the red and white, and therefore I absolutely want this guy to succeed and hope that he will. Let's go to... That's a strange super chat, Temi, and I don't understand it. I have absolutely no idea. Box Fresh says, here's how I feel. That's fair enough, mate. That's fair enough. Arsenal says, I'm very excited about Madueke. If he hadn't been at Chelsea, I imagine most people would too. John says, would you say the most annoying part of all this is that we're giving Chelsea 52 million, but haggling with Sporting for 3 to 5 million, maybe give Sporting that 5 and take it from the Chelsea deal? John, if transfers worked like that, of course I would equally feel as irritated, but I know they don't work like that. But I know it's very hard for people to kind of get their heads around that. It's frustrating from my perspective because knowing how these things work, like I don't get annoyed about this because I know that's not how they work. But I have to have the empathy that a lot of people don't recognise how kind of these situations evolve and develop, and the principles that Arsenal have in paying a certain fee for evaluation they have of a player. We also only know certain external things like overall prices when obviously we don't know the formal breakdown of these figures. And it looks like it's just 3 to 5 million that's been haggled over, and in other senses it's not. And obviously the broader context of paying just what clubs want has bigger ramifications for you in a broader context for future deals that you hope to do as well. But I get why people look at it and go, why just pay the money? Were it so easy. Black Magic says, could you comment on the potential emotional trauma that Gyökeres is under due to the protracted nature of his transfer and whether this could have an effect on his eventual adjustment to Arsenal? I can't comment because I don't know the guy, don't know the situation regarding him personally. I don't imagine that a deal that is obviously one you want to happen and that will see you earn a huge amount of money at your new club is going to cause emotional trauma. I mean, that phrase in particular is incredibly sensitive and should be associated with far more serious situations than a transfer of a footballer from one club to another for a huge sum of money. So I'm uncomfortable using that terminology personally because I think it's better used in much more serious circumstances. Am I concerned that Gyökeres is under any amount of stress about this protracted transfer? No. This is how transfers work. They take time, especially the ones that are, of course, of a higher price tag. Perry Paris is Arsenal generally lowball and then work their way up in terms of transfer fees. I didn't see any news about bids being rejected for Madueke. Am I missing something? Yeah, the first offer was turned down, Perry. The first offer that was up to £50 million was turned down by Chelsea. The club's re-engaged and have now come to an agreement of a deal worth, with add-ons included, £52 million, it is believed. Jeffrey says, Tom, when are we going to change the background and the layout of the new home kit? Love the work, by the way. Well, hopefully we're going to be getting our scarves put up soon, but probably it might take a week or so. There's more that I still need to do as well. Box Wrestlers might as well have a blue kit at this point. Jasper says, do we keep buying these Chelsea players because they have players to burn and we have very low risk tolerance? It makes these Chelsea players very easy to get. There's an argument. Obviously, Arsenal's interest in Madueke is not just limited to his time with Chelsea. Arsenal, to my understanding, had followed the player and had a scouting, had a strong scouting understanding of his time with PSV prior to his move to Chelsea. Chelsea's transfer model of stockpiling a lot of very young players and then letting them leave because at the age of 23, had Madueke joined a club where he would have been playing week in, week out, and starting every single week, he would have progressed more, I think, to this point. And obviously his transfer value may even be potentially higher. The reality is that because Chelsea stockpiles so many attacking players, minutes become so convoluted for those players that they can't increase the value as significantly as what maybe naturally those players would have done in those 2 or 3 years that they spend at that club. So clubs look at Chelsea as potential. They look at Chelsea as basically an area now where they could get good deals for young players because they keep signing young players. They keep having this churn of playing staff that leads clubs to look at it and think there could be some opportunities here to get a player that might be in a different setting, much better than what they are in a Chelsea team that has got a lot of question marks about it. And therefore, Arsenal have really looked to try and exploit that clearly by what they've done in the recent past. Danny says, Madueke, Eze and Gyökeres would be a good window and make most fans pleased. Hope they get this done and make it easy. I am curious, and I might put a poll into the chat box as well. Let me see if I can just put this into the chat in terms of kind of a window. So rate this window out of 10. And this is the window. Kepa, Mosquera, assuming that gets done. Norgard, Zubamendi, Gyökeres, Madueke, Eze. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's say that, and let's say that Trossard's, and let's say no attacking sales other than Nelson and Vieira. Let's just say that. You assume that's the case. So you've got your 0 to 4. I think we can leave that there. We've got your 5 to 6. We've got 7 to 8. And we've got 9 to 10. They're your options. Why can't I start the poll? Oh, I'm over. No attacking sales. There we go. Start poll. That's the poll. 7 players signed. Kepa, Mosquera, Norgard, Zubamendi, Gyökeres, Madueke, and Eze. but no players are signed. That's the question. And I want you to tell me what you would rate that out of 10. At the beginning of the window, of course, we did a show, I think, on June 1st, where we talked about what would be a 9, 10, 8, whatever window. And a lot of that, of course, was based off of just numbers of signings. So we talked about what we need. If Arsenal can land 5 to 6 signings, I thought they'd had a very decent window. If they managed to land 6 to 7 signings, they would have had a great window. And looking, of course, at those signings, we knew that we wanted to bring in a defensive midfielder, potentially another one if Partey was also to leave on top of Jorginho. If, of course, we need a defender, which we do, a backup goalkeeper, a striker, a wide player, and, of course, I said that a luxury addition on top of that could make it go from a 9 to a 10 would be Eze. Now, I can't rate this window, what I've listed here for me, as a 10 out of 10 window, because Madueke for me is not a starting quality signing, as I would have wanted the wide signing, of course, to have been. That would be your Rodrygo. That would have been your Nico Williams. That would have been someone of that ilk, someone of that level. And I don't put Madueke yet. He's definitely maybe got the potential to become that. But as of right now, he doesn't have the potential yet. I look at that window from a personal point of view as a solid 9 out of 10 window. If Arsenal were to land Rodrygo on top of that, it would go to the 10. So I've offered you that question. That's your 7 to 8 question. 7 to 8. I mean, that's what's winning right now. 47% of you say 7 to 8. 9 to 10 of you. What we're going to do is we're going to leave that poll up for the next 5 minutes. And then we're going to change the poll. But I'll make sure to keep track of what the results of that poll were. So give me a reminder in 5 minutes' time, people. Let me know what you think in the poll in the chat box. Of course, if you're listening on catch up, you can't vote on the poll, but let us know in the chat box down below, in the comment section down below afterwards, what you would have rated that window out of 10 if I'd have told you on June 1st that's what Arsenal would be doing during this window. It's mad. Some people obviously are like this, who say right now it's a 3. And that's right now, I guess. Arsenal having signed Zubimendi, Norgard, Kepa, and I've agreed the deal for Noni Madueke, but it's not done yet. It's not confirmed yet. We've only signed 3 players. So yeah, without a doubt, it's not a high number at all at this moment in time. More is needed. Charlie says more games means we need depth and numbers. We work the ball on Saka's side, so you can't expect a youth player to do a job like Saka can. Madueke does make sense. Do you remember how many people were saying the words Arteta has run Saka into the ground? That was a phrase I think that came up a lot last season. Arsenal are signing a player to stop that from happening. I will reiterate the point again, and I know a lot of people like Ethan Nwaneri playing in a wide area. I will reiterate this again. Ethan Nwaneri himself and the club are believed not to see his future as a winger. He is seen more so as a central attacking player who plays either as a 10, like the Ødegaard style, or as an 8, like the Declan Rice style of player at the moment. That's where they see Nwaneri's future. But when it comes to this idea that Saka was ran into the ground by Arteta last season, or just throughout his career, and so, of course, with this idea that we then go and invest in a depth option, I find it just a little odd how much of the vociferous nature of the complaints are about this. I think it's the price. I think people are concerned about how much it costs to sign Madueke. I think that's probably the biggest thing. So I'd be curious to know at what price those people that don't want Madueke here for 50 million would have felt comfortable. I told you that I was comfortable in the 30 to 35 million pound bracket. That was kind of where my comfortability with that deal was. Now, the reality is, as we all know, that's never going to happen with the players that are moving right now. Madueke had a better season last year than Kudus, and Kudus is moving for more money than what Madueke is currently moving for. So that kind of gives you a bit of a ballpark. Anthony Elanga, of course, scored at a slower rate of goals than what, of course, Madueke did last season. And he's also going for a larger amount of money than Madueke. So you kind of get the ballpark of what the going rate for a winger is of Premier League experience at this point in the market. So that's for me, where we are. Cole says, I never feel comfortable buying Chelsea players. I hate the club with a passion. And I get that. I absolutely empathise with those of you that are just so sick and tired of Arsenal signing Chelsea players. I really, 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 really do get it. Clive says £50 million is a bit heavy. £5 million for a very good keeper is brilliant. Both together and we're stronger. I mean, the £5 million, Clive, the issue with this is that the £5 million is a release clause. So Arsenal didn't have to negotiate that fee. They just paid that fee because that's what it took to get it done. The issue I've got with this example is that if we're talking about Arsenal's ability to get a good price for a player, the Kepa one we can't really count because it was a release clause. But if you'd have said we've signed, if the release clause didn't exist and you were signing Madueke and Kepa for £57 million, I'd still feel that's pretty expensive, to be honest. I'd still feel that's quite expensive. It just now depends upon the impact that they both have. Nifty Legend says it's the price, the club, and the potential to stop other deals happening. We also don't have the striker yet. And I can't disagree with this comment. This is fair. The price, the club we're buying him from, the potential that it has to prevent Arsenal from doing something else, and the fact that the striker is not yet agreed, all of that whips up a very fair, critical response to this transfer. It doesn't whip up a fair response when it comes to the abuse, of course, that's associated with a lot of cretinous fools who feel okay to abuse a player. But it absolutely does whip up enough to level criticism and concern and doubts over this potential transfer, definitely. Revsan says, hi, Tom, assuming that we sell Trossard and sign Eze, do you think there is still room in the squad for Rodrygo? Where would Eze and Waneri play? I think that there's if you were to sell Trossard, regardless of what we do with Eze, regardless of what happens with Waneri, yes, I still think there is room. I really think that people have underestimated just how bad things got last season, just how short we were last season. So from my point of view in that regard, I really, 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 really would encourage people to look back on last season and realise how bad things were. And says Tommy's a £30 million player, and I said 30 to 35 is what my comfortable realm of paying for Madueke was. So Anthony, we are in agreement. Miguel says, of course, we need a backup. Madueke, he didn't sign himself. I just think the transfer would have gone down better had we have got the Gyökeres deal done first. But we can't control the order in which players come in. I've seen some people suggest we should have delayed this deal. That's odd to me. We can't complain about the club not being quick enough in deals. We can't complain about the club not being proactive to get deals done quickly and then say we need to start delaying deals and do the other deals first. That's not how it works. That's not how a transfer window works. So, no, that suggestion is silly. The whole delay Madueke, do the Gyökeres first. It's happening at a rate that it would have always happened at. The Madueke deal is just easier to do than the Gyökeres deal is. Bassem says, how do you feel about signing Jackson? Absolutely not. Don't want him anywhere near Arsenal Football Club. Please don't sign Nicholas Jackson, Arsenal. Please do not sign Nicholas Jackson. Nick says, it's his alleged attitude issues. I think that all stems from that penalty scenario, doesn't it? Like the penalty thing with Palmer and all that. Arsenal are big on kind of player mentality. They're big on temperament of players, and they always do a lot of due diligence when it comes to scouting players, not just of what they do with the ball, but how they are off the pitch. A lot of work goes into that. So I would feel confident that the attitude side of things, the application side of things would not be something the club are concerned about if they're going through with the transfer. Morgan says, absolutely support when he has the shirt on, but I'll reserve judgment on his value until I see him in action. And I think that's absolutely fair. I have no complaints about that point of view at all. Absolutely no complaints whatsoever. Let's go to let's scroll. Who says Philip says Gyökeres is off. There's been no reports at all suggesting the deal is off. Yes, there's been claims in Portugal that the deal is at a point, at a kind of treacherous stage, but there has been no reports, Philip, of that being the case at all that I've seen. Unless something is breaking right now, which I've just done a little click, I can't see that report anywhere. D says, Tom, you say that about Jackson, but if we signed him, you'd soon be behind it and we'd start gaslighting the fans for the club. D, if we were to sign Nicholas Jackson, the same goes. I don't want him. Personally, I don't think it's the right signing. I don't personally think Madueke is the right signing. I've tried to make sense of it. I think there's absolutely nothing wrong in trying to make sense of what's happening. But I don't want this, not signings I personally want. So I think people need to take off their hats of this kind of weird fandom sides of the fence, this weird kind of perception that people have, and recognize that people just have opinions. And just because it's different to yours doesn't mean there's a agenda. It doesn't mean there's some kind of ulterior motive. It's the most arrogant thing in the world to think that if someone has a different opinion to you, there must be something else going on that leads them to that conclusion. In some cases, that might be the case, certainly. But to assume that about anybody is so arrogant, so incredibly arrogant to believe someone who has a different opinion to your own, there must be something else going on to explain. That's the only reason that differing opinion could exist. Toby says they can't go for Nicholas Jackson. Surely they can't. Vacan says, regarding the Gyökeres deal, is it likely Sporting fold considering he refuses? I think that there's two sides to that. There's the one side that is, yes, the pressure of the player eventually just leads them to accepting a compromise on the price. The other side to that is that because the player is so desperate, the club are just quite happy to just hold out on that price. But most of the time we see it's the former, not the latter, that ends up happening. Bra says, top four buys, your best players, they said, what's the point of qualification if we sign mid players? I guess the argument is that you can't find a top player to be a backup to Saka. That is, I guess, the argument. And that we've wanted a backup to Saka for so long and needed one. And that's why, so many fans have said that Arteta needs to stop running Saka into the ground. We need a competent number two to him. We need to sign somebody that can come in. Waneri, for me, is not that player. He is a central player. And even if he was a wide player, it's a huge gap between those two. A huge gap between Saka and Waneri. And I personally feel more comfortable with having Madueke there. He wouldn't be my personal choice, but I feel more comfortable. And I guess the question, therefore, is who do you sign? Who is going to come in and be the number two to Saka? Who is it going to be? Civil Salad says, you're being naive thinking that he is going to be back up to Saka. Okay. I disagree. I think that's absolutely what he is going to be used to be. I think he's absolutely going to be used as another player to play in that position. Does it mean that he's only going to play that role? No, of course not. That's not what I'm saying. But he absolutely will be seen as a player that if Saka is not fit, for me, he will be the first player that starts in that role. That's what I would expect Arsenal to do. Would be my assumption that they would do that. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at on that one. The argument I guess I would have is that if you were to sign Rodrygo and keep Martinelli or Trossard or both of them, then if Saka wasn't fit, you'd move Rodrygo to the right and play Martinelli on the left. I guess that's what I'd rather would have happened. But if the club clearly don't see it that way, and if indeed they are trying and do a deal for Rodrygo, they see him as being, he is the left winger. And no matter if Saka is fit or not, he will always be a left winger if they make that move for Rodrygo. I guess that's the way they're viewing that, is that they don't want a scenario where if Saka's not fit and they've signed Rodrygo, they have to move Rodrygo into a less not familiar, because he's certainly familiar with that role, but a less effective role compared to what his best role is, which obviously we know is certainly on the left-hand side. So I guess that's kind of what I would have done personally. Civil says, who signs a left wing for a right wing backup? He's not a left winger, mate. He's left-footed. He is a right winger. He's an inside forward. Always has been. Always will be. So I think that's maybe the mistake you're making, is that you're believing that Madueke is a left winger. He's not a left winger. He is a right winger. He's an inside forward, and he cuts inside and gets onto his left foot. He's played 11 games at left wing throughout his whole career, from the youth teams to the senior teams to the Eredivisie to the Premier League. He's played 11 games on the left. Do you want to take a guess at how many games he's played on the right? Do you want to have just a little guess? Anybody? 161 games. So if this is what you think about Madueke, that he's a left winger, I'm sorry, but that's where you're making the mistake. 5,000, yes, 5,000 games. 5,000 matches on the run. And it says, Tom, you don't spend 52 million on a player to be on the bench. Well, Manchester City have quite a lot. Manchester City have won a lot of trophies. So if we want to be in a position, this is what I'm really confused about this point of view. This idea that you don't spend 50 million pounds on a backup, because he's obviously coming in to play and he'll play games, but he's also coming in to be that other potential option for Saka when he's not there. Nico Gonzalez cost how much for City? Kusanov cost how much for City? Matthias Nunez cost how much for City? I'm just going down there, all transfers of all time. How much did Calvin Phillips cost City? Julian Alvarez obviously was always a backup to Erling Haaland, technically. And if it wasn't for Erling Haaland's injury, you can imagine Omar Marmoush potentially as well. And in that sense, obviously benching others. They spent a lot on Ferran Torres, who was definitely a backup at the time. So clubs that have won the most trophies over however many seasons absolutely do spend that amount of money on players that aren't necessarily going in immediately to their starting 11. Ilmatic says Pep doesn't take Chelsea leftovers. Two words for you, mate. Mateo Kovacic is what I would say. So the answer to your question, I think, is fairly answered there. So Mateusz Kovacic. Also, Marcus Bettinelli just got signed by Manchester City to be a backup goalkeeper. So sorry to also disprove that point. Ashley says, yes to Noni. I wanted physical, fast wingers, not Ethan, who is left-footed on the right wing, not like Nelly and Rodrygo, who are young and hungry and a little wages, not Sané, who understand being a Saka alternative. Sané one's an interesting. Obviously, when Leroy Sané was linked to Arsenal, that was also a solid no. You know, most of the fan base said no, categorically. Do not want Arsenal to sign Leroy Sané. He's too old. His wages are too high. I'm just taking a picture, by the way, of the poll, as I said I would at this point, because we're going to do another poll in a second. So let's end that poll, shall we? So we end that poll with 44% of you saying if Arsenal were to sign Kepa, Mosquera, Norgard, Zubamendi, Gyökeres, Madueke and Eze with no attacking sales, it would be 44% of you say 7 or 8 out of 10. 9 to 10 would be 26%. 5 to 6 out of 10, according to 17% of you. It's I think and 12% of you say 0 to 4 out of 10. And I read something yesterday. I read something really quite interesting. I was listening to a podcast. It was talking about kind of the percentage of populations that are just kind of like, what's the way of putting this? They were saying 15% like of a society, 60% of the society are just like, you know, pretty decent people. You've then got 20% of the 25% of the society they lose their way, but they come back and they're kind of there. And then there's always 15 to 20% of the population that are just not very nice people. Now, I'm not saying that all the people that have voted 0 to 4 are in that camp, but it's interesting the spread of those percentages after listening to that podcast yesterday. So let's redo the poll. So rate this window. It was so Arsenal sign. So we sign Kepa, Norgard, Mosquera, Zubi, Eze, Madueke. No, sorry, not Madueke. Rodrygo, Gyökeres. That was the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the same 7 players. What is the score out of 10? So that was 0 to 4, 5 to 6, 7 to 8, and 9 to 10. That is the poll. So get voting. Get voting on that poll. Very curious to see the perspective change if that is Arsenal's window. It's bearing in mind some people already still voting on 0 to 4, by the way. So the trolls still exist in our chat box. Gus says Adin Gra went to Sunderland for 20 bags. A much more exciting prospect. Is he? He's much more exciting. Adin Gra is much more exciting of a signing than Madueke. Why? Why is he much more exciting? He's same age. Last season, he got for Brighton. How many goals and assists? He scored 2 goals and got 2 assists in the Premier League. Is he more exciting? I mean, that wouldn't suggest that he is. Wow, his stats aren't very good at all. Progressive passes. He's in the first percentile. For the record, you want to be in the 99th percentile. He's in the first percentile. I've never seen that before. I've never seen someone in the first percentile. So he's among the worst players in the world in Europe's top 5 leagues for progressive passes. 23rd percentile for non-penalty goals, 41st percentile for assists. This is per 90, by the way. Like, it's taken into account that he's only got 1,097 minutes. Like, it's not going off of everything. That's a bit of a strange one. For me, I really don't think that he's a better signing at all. And Craig says he's not at all. D says Noni over Adin Gra. Ife says Adin Gra, geez. I mean, it seems that a lot of people in the chat don't agree with that. Ambali says Adin Gra really isn't better. Philip, though, says yes, he is. Philip seems to think that he is. Rohan says, you hate other people's opinions. Talking about it, I hate that. Yeah, I hate that opinion. Why wouldn't you hate that opinion? Rate this window out of 10. Kepa, Mosquera, Norgard, Zubimendi, Gyökeres, Madueke, Eze, and you've rated it between 0 and 4 out of 10. Of course I hate that point of view. I hate that. I have I have so little respect for that. Imagine rating that window 0 to 4 out of 10. That's nuts. That's crazy. It just undermines any point of view I think you'd ever have, ever. So, yeah, that's crazy. Maya says, what are you trying, Tom? People who voted 6 to 10 would rate 9 to 10. That wasn't 6 to 10 wasn't an option, Maya. Eddie says, if 52 million is justified based on money involving Kudus's and Elanga's deal, can we expect a similar amount of money for Fabio Vieira? No, because we're talking about Premier League, consistent Premier League players. And obviously Fabio Vieira isn't one of those. He's not really played that much in the Prem. He went on loan to the Portuguese league, had a decent season. He's not a winger for starters. He's an attacking midfielder. So no, I don't think that works, Eddie, as much as maybe you thought it did. I know I didn't put Madueke in the poll. I didn't want to put Madueke in the poll. That wasn't the point of the poll. Kevo says, how about you rate the window? Because round about now, it's a 1 out of 10. We only got one player to replace a player. The other players we signed in your eyes are backups. If the window was to close right now, Kevo, it's a solid 4 or 5, if that, out of 10. It's not a good window. If the window closed today, no attackers signed, 2 defensive midfielders, a backup goalkeeper, it's a 3 out of 10. Is that what you wanted, Kev? I don't know what you're after. But the window is not closing today. Gus says, how do people rate the Norgard signing? I'm not against it at all. No, I think it's a very decent deal. Like 11 million, 12 million quid for a player of that amount of experience, replacing Jorginho. I don't think he takes the needle backwards at all. I've liked Norgard for quite a while. We did a video, I talked about it on the channel 2 or 3 years ago, where he was among the centre midfield underrated signings I thought Arsenal could make. It's happening a bit later than that. But yeah. Kian says, I know it's not football related, but I remember you saying that Subfocus was your favourite drum and bass artist. I see him Sunday at Silverworks, and what a show he put. Oh, mate, you got to see one of the best. You got to see his live show where he has the big circular disc, and it is the best live experience as a drum and bass fan in the context of drum and bass. And of course, I know that a lot of you aren't drum and bass fans, but in the context purely of drum and bass, Subfocus for me is unrivaled. Dimension a very close second. Circular sound, it's unreal, absolutely brilliant. I think I've seen it like 4 times. I think I've been to Circular Sound about 4 times. I gutted I couldn't go, but yeah, I was working, so I couldn't. To those who date that window as 0 to 4, what makes it a 10 out of 10? That's a really good question. Like, to those of you that have voted 0 to 4 on the window that we've done here, I wonder if anyone's brave enough to put their hands up and say that they've rated it as 0 to 4. Anyone brave enough? Let us know what would have made it a 10 out of 10 window, or a 9 out of 10 window, or even 8 out of 10 window. I would have loved to have known what would have happened. But yeah, it's an interesting social experiment, this. They want Sesko. I really don't think the toxicity of those that wanted Sesko mean that because we're getting Gyökeres, it's gone down to a 0 out of 4. I really think you're very wide of the mark of those that wanted Sesko. Brat said, Norgard, Madueke, Kepa. Would you have imagined them joining when the season finished? Wasn't this the best window promised after all the money saving in the past few years? I mean, obviously, that's not what's going to happen. That's not all that's going to be done this window. I think we can all be very sensible enough to admit that. Russo says, hi, Tom. Would you be concerned if the club is unable to move on Zinchenko, Vieira, Sambi in this window, seeing as there isn't much links to our players? Yes, I would be concerned if none of them moved on. However, I have said this before. These are players that tend to go in August. They aren't players that tend to be sold earlier than that. We have to be honest that these are not players that are going to be at the top of clubs' lists of players they want to sign. They're just not. They have not developed that way. They've not developed and they haven't become that profile of player. So these players tend to be those that clubs will move for when they have exhausted other options in the market. And that's most likely to happen in August, not July or June, sadly. So am I concerned? Yeah, I think there's a level of concern to have. But I think that fairly these are types of players that tend to move on in August, like Nketiah, like Ramsdale, like Smith Rowe to a degree, you know, like they did last window. And I think I said that last window. I said Nketiah and Ramsdale, they'll probably go in August. And they ended up going in August. So, yeah. Trossard, on the other hand, I'd look at more as a player who would go earlier. And we're seeing significant links now with Trossard to an exit as well. Arthur says Saka, Isak, and Rodrygo. So instead of Gyökeres, Isak, instead of Madueke, Rodrygo, that would turn your 0 out of 4 to a 10 out of 10. It's amazing how just 2 signings take a whole window from 0 to 4 to 10 out of 10. Andrew says, you know, there are people in here just taking the mick. Oh, without question. Yeah. We have a lot of silent trolls that listen to this chat, talking to you. that listen to this show. Harish says, Tom, can you please compare Ethan, as he has played as a winger last season per 90, to Madueke last season in all comps? My guess would be Madueke is not better. I think it'd be quite difficult to do because I think the numbers will be slightly affected by the fact he played not just in those wide areas. Let me see if I can find it. Let me see if I can do it because I don't know. So goals per non-penalty goals, Ethan Nwaneri has 0.48 per 90 compared to Madueke's 0.31. Assists, he has 0.16 to Madueke's 0.13. Nwaneri wins in that regard as well. Pass completion, Ethan Nwaneri, 79.3 to Madueke's 77.4. Progressive carries, 4.5 for Nwaneri, 6.82 for Madueke. Touches in the attacking penalty area, 4.42 for Nwaneri, 8.15 for Madueke. Progressive passes received, 10.38 for Nwaneri, 10, so barely anything between those two, for Madueke. Defensively, tackles, so looking at what they provide defensively, 1.37 for Nwaneri, 1.11 for Madueke. Interceptions, 0.16 sorry, for Nwaneri, 0.44 for Madueke. Blocks, Nwaneri wins. Clearances, Madueke wins. Aerial duels, Nwaneri loses to Madueke. What else have we got? We've got passes attempted. Nwaneri wins. Pass completion, Nwaneri wins. So, yeah, I mean, obviously these stats are affected by slightly the positioning of those players. But Nwaneri's coming out very well right now. Obviously, the context of the clubs is important to point out here. But I think what the argument is here is that the club are investing in what Madueke will do at Arsenal. I guess that's the argument that they will have, is that they believe with Madueke moving to Arsenal that those numbers will significantly go up playing for us. But as I've said before, it's not the signing I've wanted. It's the signing that I am still trying to get my head around and make sense of. But the club don't see Ethan's future in the wide areas. Apparently, he doesn't either. So I guess that's why, even though we can compare them as of last season, but it's very difficult to get it. It's worth pointing out Ethan played half the minutes of Madueke. So maybe if Ethan's numbers, if we had a larger sample size for Ethan, it would be a fairer comparison because Madueke played double the amount of minutes. But it's difficult. That said, Madueke last season in the league, 4 goals, 1 assist. Ethan in the league last season. Sorry, that's not right. Last season in the league, 7 goals, 3 assists for Madueke, 4 goals, 2 assists for Ethan. So there you go. There's the stats. Bob says, I just see that signing Madueke covers Saka and the imminent departure of Trossard. If didn't sign a player now, would risk being left short in deals. Right, we're going to wrap things up. I've just checked the time, just glanced at the clock as well. I want to take a quick picture of the poll because it's really quite interesting to me what the change of just Rodrygo for Madueke changes about people's ratings. So, if Rodrygo was coming in instead of Madueke, according to, and we had 1,000 votes on the first poll, we've had 727 votes on the second poll, 63% of you. So that 9 out of 10 was 26%. That goes up from 26% if it's Rodrygo instead of Madueke to 63%. The 7 to 8s have basically gone into that because it was 45%. That's gone down to 23. Wait, what's the maths on that? That can't be right. So it's gone from 26 to 63. So that's 47% increase, right? No, 37% increase. 37% increase from the 9s to 10s. The 7 to 8s have gone down 22%. So 15% of the vote has come from either the 0 to 4 or the 5 to 6. Just by replacing Madueke with Rodrygo has jumped from 6 or below to 9 to 10. And I don't think that is representative of a fair increase for me. I don't think that the replacing of Madueke as a signing with Rodrygo as a signing is enough to take a reasonable scoring of a transfer window where 13%, I think we said, or 15%, 13% of the people that are voting from the 0s to 6 to the 9 to 10. That's a huge jump, a massive, massive jump. That's my opinion. Anyway, thank you so much as always for tuning in. Really appreciate your time. I hope you have had an absolutely fantastic morning and week and are going to have a great rest of your day. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful. And as always, up the Arsenal.